Hi, I'm Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. It's time for another Writer to Writer Interviews. We have two wonderful guests today, GP and Randy. Let's get started.
Gottlieb, could you talk to us a little bit about one of the fun things about your book is the culinary part, the part about the food and the cafe and stuff. You want to talk about how you came up with that idea?
Yes, I spent a lot of my time, well, in the pre-pandemic days I did, in coffee houses and cafes. I love nothing better than meeting a friend or sitting with a book in a cafe, having a yummy drink and maybe something to eat, and watching all the people around me. And then I noticed that I was always thinking about murder. It's one of the things I love, murder mysteries. And a few years ago, I sat down and started writing a murder mystery. And it was set in a cafe, the kind, sort of compilation of all the cafes that I've ever been to, all the things that I loved. And that cafe, my Whipped and Sipped Cafe, serves the most delicious but healthful food.
It sounds great. You know, when I read Smothered, it's very obvious that it's a vegan cafe, and it's a really unusual cafe. Do you? And I know part of your book is you offer recipes at the end. Where did you, or how did you come up with the recipes, and what does that have to do with the story that you tell, the narrative that you tell? And,
The food doesn't have much to do with the narrative, although everybody I know likes to joke about warning my husband about poison in his food. That's been done. I would never do that in a book or anywhere else. Um, the pastry chef in my book is a vegan. And so I created the recipes that the cafe would sell. And I am not vegan, but so it was really interesting not to bake with eggs. I'm also not gluten free, and most of my baked goods are gluten free. So I have a lot of fun inventing. It's part of the whole process. I write for much of the day, and when I'm not writing, I'm in the kitchen creating recipes like a mad scientist.
um, your location is Chicago, which I assume is has something to do with your personal one. Can you tell about why you chose the Windy City for your setting as opposed to any place else?
I could have chosen lots of places, but just so happens that I live in the center of the city, and I set my cafe in my neighborhood, my imaginary cafe in my real neighborhood. And Chicago is an amazing city, more so when there's not a pandemic and the culture is available. So I also live near the lake. It's astounding. We think it looks like the ocean. A sad thing about Chicago is we have quite a lot of crime here, a lot of murder. In fact, homicides are up some crazy percentage, I just read in the Chicago Tribune. It wasn't difficult to imagine some of the kinds of murders that I created because we're confronted with them all the time.
Yeah, unfortunately, there would be no shortage of inspiration with where you live and is it actually called? Would it be inner city? Is that are you in the city? You're in
Now,
the you're near the shore. I can tell that from the story.
I'm in the neighborhood called Lakeview. It's just north of downtown, and it's not inner city, meaning downtown. It's not in the financial district. It's called the near north side.
Okay, all right. But it still can be a tough place to live sometimes.
Um, right now, every place is a tough place to live,
Yeah, well,
but I think anywhere in the world can be dangerous, and there's crazy people everywhere, and there's good people everywhere. I live in a building, and I feel pretty secure here, but I have watched bodies dug up in the harbor. I have seen crimes. We've all seen crimes, hit and run drivers and car accidents. It's a big city.
yeah, Um, One of the things that intrigued me about your novel that I found different than others is you populate your narratives, both of them, with quite a number of different characters, and the characters themselves are very different from each other. You want to talk a little bit about your decision about using the characters you do and the kinds of with the kinds of backgrounds that they come from? I think that's very distinctive. I'm interested to hear.
I think there's a difference between setting your murder mystery in a small town where there does tend to be a more homogenous group of people of a certain socioeconomic level, certain religious or wealth, everything about them might be a little more similar. But when you live in a big city, there's people of all kinds all the time surrounding us. And so the fact that I have gay characters and characters of color different from different parts of the world, somebody from Panama and somebody people from all over basically, and people of different religious persuasions. And I think it's important to not just portray people of all different kinds, but to go into their backgrounds and explain who they are. I'm interested in people. And when I meet somebody, I want to know more than just the color of their hair and their eyes. I want to know who they are and what's important to them. So I try to say that, to share that about my characters as well.
Now, I know that the first book, if I remember, first book is called Whipped and Sipped, right? Isn't that the title? And the second
It's
book
the
is Smothered? Is that
It's the
correct?
Whipped and Sipped Mystery. The first book is Battered, a Whipped and
Battered,
Sipped
that's right.
Mystery. And the second book is Smothered, a Whipped and Sipped Mystery. And the third book isn't here yet.
And I love the titles. I mean, I love the double entendre of the title from both a murderous perspective as well as from a baking perspective. That's very interesting. The third one's not here yet. Do you have a title for it yet?
Crushed, a Whipped and Sipped Mystery.
Rushed, like hurried,
No,
rushed?
crushed like
Oh,
ice.
crushed, of course. That's perfect, right? Very good. Um, and when are you expecting to have the third mystery ready for your readers?
Hopefully next year.
Oh, I didn't ask you this. I should have. When does, I know I got an advance copy of Smothered. When does it launch?
February 16th, 2021.
Hopefully, it's a good time to be launching a book. It's certainly better than last year.
Thanks so much, Randy.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this message. And we are back. Let's get back into the conversation.
Randy, how did you come up with the idea of suspense thriller with a paranormal element? And where are all those ghosts from?
Well, I'm fascinated from an interesting perspective about ghosts. I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but ghosts. More than 50% of the people in the United States believe in ghosts, based on two surveys taken in the last couple of years, and more than one out of every five people have had an actual personal encounter with a ghost. So I thought it was an interesting way to capture that interest and put it into a form that I really like, which is an amateur sleuth whodunit, which is the book has best been described by one critic that called it a cold case murder mystery wrapped in a ghost story served with a side of romance, all set in one of the most beautiful locations in the U.S. I thought that's kind of a nice way to put it. And those pieces work very well together. I like the ghost part, but my ghosts are different than most others. I try very hard to keep everything in the story as realistic as possible. Did a lot of research on ghosts and ghost hunting, and what you'll find in my book is very close to what the experts in the field have documented in terms of ghosts' interactions with human beings.
Are the ghosts always dead people?
Yes, ghosts by definition are individuals who have passed on. It is very interesting that, I don't know if you know this or not, every culture in the world has a belief in ghosts. Every religion has part of its mythology a belief in ghosts. And one of the consistent beliefs, they're not all the same, but one of the consistencies, the ghosts are always someone who has died but passed on, but for some reason are not able to move on beyond the area in between.
I know less about ghosts than I know about particle physics. So you were talking about location. How did you choose two very beautiful locations for your first two books, Cape May and the Chesapeake Bay?
Yeah, Chesapeake Bay is for the first one, Blood on the Chesapeake, and it came out of just personal preference. My wife and I have been traveling to the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay for about 10 years, just as a great place, fun vacation spot that has beautiful, incredible sunsets, wonderful sails on the river, and then some of the best seafood anywhere in the world. And also, it's one of the kind of undiscovered gems in the U.S. I do a lot of author talks, and I ask who's been to the Chesapeake. Not maybe 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 20 people. It's not. I will say it's not. It's not unspoiled, but it's not touristy. You can find the cafes like you like. You can find the shops that my wife likes, but they're not over. It hasn't overrun the area.
Is it a hotbed of crime?
No, there's not. It's a very small town kind of crime. Although in my first book, the crime that we discover in the story is actually a lynching, and there was a lynching in this area that I portray the story in. Although the lynching occurred 20 years earlier than the story in my book, so there is some historical basis for how that crime happened in that particular area. The second one, Cape May, which is the new one that's out this year, Crimson to Cape May. I chose Cape May because we went there for a wedding. And it's a very unusual, I've never seen any place like it. It is like lots of places, beautiful beachfront, huge long white sandy beach, huge beach. What's different is it has the largest collection of Victorian architecture in the United States. They have over 150 Victorians all scattered throughout. And then when I learned that it is also known as the most haunted seaport on the eastern seaboard, I said it's got to be the right place to set the second story. So that's
how did you decide to set it 20 years ago to set the first story? How do you choose the time? What time period to set the stories?
Well, the stories were set because of the first story. So in the first story, I had decided to focus the story on racial injustice. And I thought the preeminent example of that had to be lynching. The lynchings, in case you don't know, happen mostly in small towns, like the one in my story. They happen not just in the South, but in the North and on the Eastern Shore. But almost the last of the lynchings occurred in the early 60s. So I began with that as an assumption of where the story has to begin. So if the lynching occurred in the early 60s, then the people who were involved in that lynching are in control of the town. They would be in their 50s. That moves the story from early 60s to the 90s. So from that point, the first book is in 98, the second book is in 99, and the third book that will be coming out will be just barely in the very beginning of 2000.
Tell us a little bit about your characters.
I have two primary characters. Daryl Henshaw, who is a dedicated teacher. I'm a teacher by profession, and he is the kind of teacher that I saw many places where I worked that does everything for the kids. One of the problems he has is that he sees ghosts, but he's not happy about that. It is not a skill he's very comfortable with, and it almost always lands him in trouble. His initial encounter with a ghost ended up costing his brother his foot and his friend his life. So he has a lot of issues about it, and those issues have generally manifest themselves in the sense that he has a bad case of OCD that he has to deal with. He falls in love with a gal that's from the Eastern Shore by the name of Erin, and Erin becomes kind of his counterbalance throughout the stories. And their romance extends from book 1 to book 2 to book 3.
So where will the third book be set?
The third book I decided to set the third book. One of the things I like about doing this series is I get to kind of pick, well, where do I want to go? So just before the pandemic hit, I was able to do my research and decided I had done some research on places and wanted to set it on the Gulf Coast of Florida. So I found a charming place that I'd never heard of before called Crystal River. It's the only place in the world that you can swim with manatees. And it's another beautiful small town nestled up in the northern part of the Gulf Coast. And so I have Daryl and Erin take their honeymoon to Crystal River over the Christmas holidays. And of course, he ends up getting encountered with another ghost, although the ghost, actually two this time, but they're a very different kind of ghost. They're children. So it's a very different kind. So the third one is actually a Christmas mystery that has another ghost feature as well.
So that'll come out by the end of the year?
I'm hoping that working with the publisher now, but I'm expecting it October of 2021, if all goes well.
Happy writing.
Best part of my life? Well, one of the best part of my life besides the grandkids right now.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this message. And we are back. Let's get back into the conversation. Gottlieb, you can answer it first. Can you describe, as much as you can, your publishing process as far as the starting process to the ending process, and how did you figure that out? Because there really is no how to. I mean, there are books out there, but most authors just figure it out as they go. So what did you do?
As a first-time author, a few years ago, I was working with somebody, an editor, teacher, and when after the 150th version of the book, when it was finally ready, I started doing that research and sending the manuscript out as query to doing queries to agents, and I received nearly 100 rejections. At around that time, I was told to keep going. I mean, Dr. Seuss got 150 rejections or something. J.K. Rowling got a bunch of rejections. So I also submitted to some of those competitions that you read about in Poet and Writers magazines, those online journals. And I sent it into one of those and I won. And the prize was a publishing contract with a wonderful small publisher. At the time he wrote, it's called DX Varos, and he listed it as exquisite speculative fiction. So he specialized in kind of sci-fi and fantasy and paranormal, historical fiction, and then he wanted to start a mystery imprint. And so I was his first mystery writer. He accepted the second, he had right of first refusal for the second book. And he accepted it, and that's where we are right now. So it was fraught with lots of disappointment, followed by incredible cheer. And I'm now focused on writing the third book.
Awesome. Okay, and same question for you. What was your publishing process like? And how, like, how did you gain the knowledge to do that?
I've been working at this for several years, so I've had some experience before, but for this particular book, the best way to explain it is very similar to Gottlieb's experience. My goal was I wanted to get an agent that could then have a shot at trying to get it with one of the major publishers. And I actually did keep track, and I queried 100 different agents, and I got several interests. I got probably a dozen of those 100 either asked for a partial manuscript or a full manuscript. But in the end, they would all go, "Oh, I like it, but I'm not passionate enough about it," or something along those lines. When I went that far, then I decided I had another group. I said, okay, there was a group of small presses that had put out that they were interested, and I submitted to 3 of those small presses. 2 of the small presses offered me a contract. I ended up going with the company the publisher I'm with now, called the Wild Rose Press. I had read some, and I knew they had a good reputation in the area. I did not know I thought they were a very small press. It turns out they're not. They have over 500 authors. They were originally a romance press, and then over time have expanded and have a Western and a science fiction and a mystery and horror. They have all different genres. And it's been a very interesting experience working with them. They've been really good to work with. If an author is looking for a place that they might find a good home for their writing, and it's in one of the categories that they do, I wouldn't hesitate recommending the Wild Rose Press. The people there have been great to work with.
Casey, did you already tell your story a bunch of times? Will you tell us?
Oh, sure. Well, first, what was the name of your publishing company?
DX Varos.
DX. You mind spelling that?
D period, X period, and then V as in very, VAROS.
Okay.
Good, because I couldn't figure out spelling either. That's helpful.
DX Virus. So you mean my publishing? So actually, I guess you can say my publishing story started actually by someone from my church knew someone who self-published, and she brought her in to have a self-publishing workshop back in, I think, 2006, 2007. And prior to that happening, I knew I wanted to start writing, but my mindset was, okay, my English scores were horrible. I don't write well. So I'm not even going to try to do inquiries, because I think I did 2 inquiries. And once they both said the same thing, what you write about is very interesting, but you need more work on your writing skills. And so one of them actually sent me a flyer. They do classes. They sent me a flyer on blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, so I started going to the library and teaching myself how to write properly, because I didn't learn. In English class, to me, felt like every year I went to the next level, they changed the rules of writing, in my opinion. I would always think when I got my test back, I was going to get an A, and it was usually a C or a D. And I would be like, this is just frustrating. So I had to teach myself how to all the right. But once I heard about the self-publishing, I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I went to the workshop, and that's basically it. I took all the notes. And then from there, I continued to go to the library and get books and find out how to publish, how to market, how to blah, 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 blah. And I've been on the self-publishing road now ever since. I'm hoping to, working on, because one of the things I've been told a great way to market your books is to submit work to magazines and journals, and then get your name out there that way. But most of them want unpublished stuff. They don't want.
Right.
So last year I spent time writing new work for all of these. And I sent in a good 10, 11, 12 short stories and poems, and all of them were rejected. Every last one of them. And I said, do I want to resubmit them elsewhere? And I was like, no. So I actually put a short story book together called Rejected, because that's what they are, rejected. And I'm hoping to one day to get with a small publishing company and publish it that way, because it took a lot of work to come up with new stories just for the purpose of submitting, and for them to be rejected. I don't want to throw them away, and I don't want to keep submitting them. So I'm just going to put them in a book and, submit it that way. But I've been on the self-publishing road. It's been very interesting. Found a lot about publishing I didn't know. I always thought you write the book and you're done, and then you hire someone else to do the rest of the work. And I didn't realize even if you hire people, they still expect you to do most of the work. And but it's taught me how to find fun in the work, if that makes sense. But yeah. That's my journey.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, this is great. Did you say you had 2 questions?
I did.
Right.
So my second question, Randy, you can answer first. You're going to pretend that you have a fairy godmother. And she says, you're going to say name anyone's name, obviously an author, and the author could be dead or alive. Once you say that name, you magically appear either in front of a typewriter or a computer or a paper and pen with that author, and you're going to be co-writing a book with this author. Who is this author? What kind of book are you writing, and why?
Oh, that's easy. The author is William Kent Kruger, who is also a mystery writer, but I don't even put myself in the same category with him. He's an Edgar Award winner, a bestseller, but I've met him several times at 2 or maybe 3 different writing conferences. And each time I've met him, I've learned a lot from him. And in fact, he's also been very kind. He did a blurb for my first book, lots of things. If I had time to be able to spend with him, I would learn tremendously, I think, at his elbow. And I would treasure that possibility if that's the case.
All right, what about you?
And this author's gonna want to write a book with me? Is that the premise?
Yes, well, that's the purpose of having a fairy godmother. She can make anything happen.
Because I would be delighted if the fairy godmother would put me fully dressed, sitting next to Jane Austen, and writing out by, with my pen on a pad of paper about the social mannerisms, but something greater. And we would write a book together that people would, just like her real books, that people would want to read every year.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Right.
Jane Austen.
Good choice.
What about you?
Me, probably Agatha Christie.
Ooh, I'm sorry I didn't pick her.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Why?
I don't know that I could write as well as she did, as far as
Not
her
many of us
mysteries
can.
are amazing to me. And I probably would choose the title for her. I don't know that I could go one-on-one with her, but her mysteries are amazing to me. How she, first of all, figures out who did it and how to do it without, like I'm not saying no one can, but I know for a fact I can never. And even when I thought, and then there were none, I was like, I know who did this. I'm reading it. I'm like, I know. And I get to the end, I'm like, what the? How did?
Wait,
So I thought it was
wait.
just amazing that she was able to think like that.
But with the fairy godmother, Agatha Christie's sitting next to you and she's saying, now,
Right.
Casey, why don't you redo this paragraph? Let's do this. And she'd give you ideas.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
then
Yep.
it would be a huge
Definitely.
bestseller.
Yes.
Oh, I'm jealous of your choice.
Oh, really? That's all the time we have for you today on Writer to Writer interviews. Thank you so much for watching. To our guests, GP and Randy, thank you so much for stopping on by. And to the audience, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Are you a guest looking for a host to interview you? Or are you a host looking for guests to interview? Radio Guest List is the website for you. It's a free listing of guests looking for shows to interview them, as well as a free listing of shows looking for guests. Whether you're looking for a guest to interview or shows to interview you, go to radioguestlist.com.